Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we watch the Sunday morning news show so that you do not have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Great to start the week with you and some of the scummiest people on corporate television and in Washington. Sorry for the technical problems if you're watching this live. We had an issue with the stream. This is the correct link. You're in the right place. Your neighbors are probably confused as to where the stream is, so go tell them as well that you're in the right spot. Let everybody in. We're an open tent.
Yep.
And a lot to recap.
So much to recap, yeah, but definitely spread the gospel that we are back and that who knows what nefarious forces were behind that technical confusion. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it at there. But it's no coincidence that we talk truth to power, and then someone, perhaps YouTube, perhaps Palantir, comes in and mucks it all up. Elon Musk, perhaps.
Who knows? Who knows who's attacking us week to week? But to make sure that we continue to bring the irreverent content that we do every single week without interruption, go to usefulidiotspodcast.com. That's our website. You get bonus content and you keep us going, and we're very grateful for it.
Yeah. So give yourself and us and the world that gift. Elon Musk, that's a good. Someone wrote in the comments. I like that. It's a new one. All right. Should we go to some of the scummiest people ever in one place? Meet the press. Meet the depressed.
Let's go to Meet the Depressed.
Good Sunday morning. President Trump's legislative agenda, what is now formally called the One Big Beautiful Bill, narrowly passed the House by one single vote. It includes an extension of the 2017 tax cut.
And just a reminder that the reason it passed by one single vote, among other things, but one really easy way for it to have not passed would have been if 3 of the Democrats who died in office had stepped down. Because that left a margin of 3 and it passed by 1. So, guys, I'm not being glib, but if you are a public servant, which is in theory what you are when you're an elected official, I know mortality is very scary thing to look at. But for the sake of the life of others, try to retire early if you have a terminal illness.
I think that really sums up our politics right here. Democrats staying in office for way too long. I mean, look at Joe Biden. And then look at this bill. Look at what's in the bill. This one big, beautiful bill that Trump is so proud of. Okay, so he's extending the tax cuts, which favored the ultra wealthy. Okay, so that's adds another $2.2 trillion to the budget deficit. Okay, and then military spending, that gets an extra $150 billion after Trump. His whole thing was like cutting waste, when everyone knows the most wasteful entity in the government is the Pentagon. And Trump's like, yep, let's go ahead and give another $150 billion. Border and immigration, that's another form of militarization of spending on the national security state. And then look at that. Medicaid changes and cuts. They're gutting $792 billion from Medicaid and other programs. Wow. So much for like helping the average working person, because it's vulnerable people who benefit from Medicaid, and it's wealthy people who benefit from tax cut extensions and from spending on the military industrial complex, because it's not like your average Joe who owns stock and owns these military contractors.
Right. And, it's so bad that we're actually going to hear Republicans cite vulnerable people. It's kind of a Freudian slip. It's like they're methinks she doth protest too much. A little Shakespeare, throw that in there. Because it's so clear that they're not protecting the most vulnerable and that they're punishing the most vulnerable. But they are certainly using that as a buzzword, which is pretty funny.
Cuts nearly $150 billion in new defense spending, almost $150 billion for border and immigration priorities, and almost $800 billion in savings for changes and cuts to Medicaid. And now the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Like savings, this way of describing savings, like cutting people off from life-saving medical care. Like we're going to save a lot of money not paying for that patient's recovery and for the medications that they need to stay alive. That's a great savings right there.
Yeah, and then once they're dead, we also don't have to take care of them.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win financially. Yeah.
We're not going to save lives. In fact, we're going to end lives, but we're going to get some savings, some fiscal savings out of that, while giving Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics even more money.
Yeah.
Johnson is urging the Senate not to make major changes to the bill. But Senate Republicans returning to Washington this week are vowing to make significant fixes to address their concerns.
I've told them I can support the package if they separate the debt ceiling off and have a separate vote on that. I want nothing to do with that. I didn't vote for the spending. I didn't vote for the debt.
I just want to make sure that there are no Medicaid benefit cuts. I'm concerned about some of what the House has done on rural hospitals, essentially, the hospital tax.
When I was watching this, I was like, wait, that's a Republican? It's Josh Hawley, obviously. But I was like, wait, I can't believe there's actually a Republican acknowledging that there are being cuts to Medicaid and cuts to people's medical care and rural hospitals under attack. So Josh Hawley, don't like him on many issues, but on this, he's right. And he's outflanking not only Republicans, but a bunch of Democrats.
Have to reduce the deficit, and so we need to focus on spending. I think we have enough to stop the process until the president gets serious about spending reduction and reducing the deficit.
By the way, Ron Johnson, just a quick reminder what kind of monster this guy is. He opposed helping people sue the church for having been sexually abused as children. That's a kind of fiscal conservatism that you can count on from Ron Johnson, protecting the church from any implications, any paying any price for sexually abusing kids. All right.
Now, any delays in the president's bill making its way through Congress comes with serious risks to the economy. The Treasury Secretary has warned Congress it must extend the debt ceiling to avert a default before August. But as Republicans sort out their differences, some House members who voted in favor of the bill got an earful of boos and jeers when they returned to their home districts.
I voted for that bill.
I was also proud to vote for President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill last week. This is a generational investment. This is a general investment. This is your time.
Republican Senator.
That's a great response to being booed. This is your time, okay? This is your time. You're spending it booing policies you don't like, okay? What are you doing? Yeah.
It's like when it reminds me of when a teacher's like, I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Whenever you want to stop expressing your dislike of something and holding me accountable and holding my feet to the fire, just let me know.
I mean, booing a politician and policies you don't like sounds like a great use of time. I'm not sure what better political the time usage there can be. Like, you don't like a policy, you boo. I mean,
right.
I think it sounds a lot, and it sounds like people felt that was very cathartic in the room. So I don't know what she's objecting to.
They're reclaiming their time to boo.
But now we're going to hear the best response so far. This comes via Senator Joni Ernst,
who made a campaign video highlighting her experience castrating pigs.
Joni Ernst defended the bill's proposed changes to Medicaid when pressed by a constituent who worried it would lead to deaths.
People are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sakes, folks. Okay, no, but what you don't want to do is listen to me when I say that we are going to focus on those that are most vulnerable.
And joining me now.
Again, the most vulnerable. I don't think so, especially when you are saying in response to people dying, we're all going to die. That doesn't sound like you're thinking about the most vulnerable, except for maybe how to let them die. I guess in that way, they're thinking about them.
Senator Joni Ernst, proponent of existentialism. Who knew? Who knew that she had that kind of outlook toward life? Like, we're all going to die. Death is inevitable. So what's the point in enacting policies that keep people alive with medical care? Because we're all going to die anyway. It's interesting take, especially from the pro-life party.
True.
Like, we're pro-life, but yet we're all going to die. So we're not going to do anything that helps keep you alive. And so that means, sorry, low-income people, we have to cut your medical care.
Right. I like the way she says, for heaven's sake. She's really, bringing us back to the afterlife. For heaven's sake, yeah. And it's hilarious that these people are Christian. Can you imagine Jesus saying something like, being told about some poor people getting sick and being like, well, I'm not going to heal them because we're all going to die.
All right, well, we're going to hear more on the Medicaid cuts in a little bit, but let's turn to another issue where Republicans and Democrats are completely violating the sanctity of life, and that is the Holocaust of our time, Gaza. And what is some of the latest news? Well, on Sunday, there was yet another massacre of desperate people in Gaza trying to get meager amounts of aid from this fake aid group set up by Israeli intelligence called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, with the help of the U.S. It's such a fraud that even the person who was tapped to head it resigned as it began because he said he couldn't take part in something that violates humanitarian principles, which is the whole point of his organization, because Israel is trying to use this fake aid group to push Palestinians to the south so it can carry out ethnic cleansing. And it's also trying to set up this fake aid group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, so they can replace the UN aid mechanism, which keeps Palestinians alive. And we talked about this extensively on Friday's episode with our guest, Mohammed Shahada. And so that's just, and then you still have routine killings going on, airstrikes hitting Palestinians in tents and some of the remaining buildings left in Gaza. It's impossible to keep track of all the atrocities. So but let's hear first from Arwa Daman. She is a former CNN correspondent who now runs a humanitarian foundation, and she's been able to visit Gaza several times. And she spoke to CNN's Fareed Zakaria.
There are people who say there is a narrative that, look, it was put out by some Israeli officials at the start of the war. The Gazans voted for Hamas. They support Hamas. They celebrated after October 7th. What's your sense?
So,
I mean, this is an insane question because it's premised on the notion that, let's say everybody in Gaza supports Hamas, right? Does that mean that Israel has the right to commit mass murder against them? If we don't like the political party that an entity supports, then we can just then it's okay to go carry out mass murder because Hamas carried out October 7th. But the civilians of Gaza didn't, like, whatever you think about October 7th, the civilians of Gaza didn't carry it out, and you don't get to carry out collective punishment against the civilian population. That's putting aside the fact that Palestinians, and I know it's uncomfortable for some people to acknowledge this for some reason, they have the right to resist military occupation. So
under international law.
Yeah. Occupied people have the right to resist their occupiers. B, whatever you think of that resistance, you don't have the right to punish civilians for the actions carried out by people who rule them and who maybe some of them voted for. But so that's just the basic point. So the question is ridiculous. But as Arwa Daman's going to point out, actually Hamas does not even have a lot of support in Gaza. Not that it even matters, but it is actually worth noting because this idea that Israel's going after Gaza while massacring civilians. So this idea that Israel's going after Hamas as it massacres civilians, it's a complete lie. They're not going after Hamas. They're going after civilians, and she's going to make that point. But just to really stress this, the question is ridiculous to begin with. It's preposterous. Yeah. Like, would other countries have the right to commit mass murder in the U.S. because George W. Bush, who invaded Iraq, killed a lot of people, because he had popular support? It's dripping with racist contempt that completely dehumanizes 2 million people.
Right. I mean, is the Israeli population fair game because they voted for far-right messianic Jewish supremacists?
Yeah, and carrying out the longest-running military occupation in the world, which is an inherent act of violence in itself. It's, in fact, the fundamental act of violence that then triggers all other acts of violence, including October 7th. October 7th wouldn't have happened if Palestinians weren't being occupied, besieged, and ethnically cleansed. That's just the reality that, unfortunately, gets completely obliterated on corporate TV. So, just to really set the point, stupid question, Fareed, but let's hear the answer.
If we look at a poll that was done by the Arab Barometer, actually incidentally just before October 7th, they found that if there in fact had been elections, the Hamas candidate would have gotten less than 25% of the vote.
You know, it's interesting there. So for people just listening, one of the candidates on the screen who has a lot of support in Gaza is Marwan Barghouti, who's not Hamas. And in fact, Hamas, when it carried out October 7th, one of the first people they wanted freed in exchange for Israeli captives was Marwan Barghouti, because Hamas recognized that he's someone who could actually unite the Palestinian political factions. And Marwan Barghouti supports the very same two-state solution that all these people on corporate TV and in Washington claim they support, but in reality don't, because they support continued Israeli occupation and ethnic cleansing. So in fact, Hamas was trying to free someone who could be described as the so-called moderate that all these people on corporate TV and in Washington always claim Palestinians need. That's who Hamas was actually trying to free, was Marwan Barghouti. And Israel won't free him precisely because they know he'd be an effective leader who could unite Palestinians and help lead them towards self-determination, which Israel is premised on denying.
Right, which is why that whole question, where's the Palestinian Mandela, is flawed for many reasons. Because first of all, Nelson Mandela did not reject outright violence. He said, we will try peace where we can, but if we can't, we will use violence. And also, Mandelas are 6 feet in the ground or in jail.
Add to that, Gaza's population is extremely young. So the vast majority of Gazans, more than 50%, were not even born or old enough to vote when Hamas came into power. Let's also remember that.
That's a great point. Israel's waging a war against a population that's majority children. Okay. So again, putting aside that Israel's no right to fire a single bullet into Gaza because it's an occupying power. Occupiers don't have self-defense rights. They have obligations. Their obligation is to end the occupation. Putting all that aside, they're also waging a war against the majority youth population who couldn't even vote for Hamas, whatever you think of Hamas.
Right.
So, yeah.
And right. So it's like, again, even though it's a disgusting, hypocritical thing to justify assassinating people, executing people over who they voted for, even that sick logic doesn't apply because there's no way a majority of the people voted for Hamas because they weren't even alive then.
Sick doesn't stick. Sick doesn't stick.
Sick doesn't stick. Yeah.
If the logic is sick, you must acquit.
I like it. Yeah.
Before
hit them with
October 7th, twice Gazans tried to rise up against Hamas and were unable to do so. And even if we look at the videos that came out, and I understand, I mean, it horrific. The scenes of, you know, the hostages being pulled into Gaza and people around there celebrating. Even if we're generous and say, you know, how many people were in those videos? 5,000? Let's call it 10,000. Let's even call it 20,000. That's 1% of the population. I have not, in my 4 trips to Gaza, heard a single person support Hamas.
You say that if people knew what was going on, if the press were let in, the Western press were let in, the war would end tomorrow. I assume by that you mean that even most Israelis have no idea what is going on in Gaza.
No, and most people, because it is so impossible to describe. I mean, even when you watch it in the videos, even if you're someone who's watching the videos every single day, it's very different when you see it because the camera shoots straight and when you realize it's 360 around you. And add to that, a lot of the, you know, the narrative, oh, we're targeting Hamas, we're not targeting civilians, you know, Hamas is doing this, Hamas is doing that. When you're on the ground and you're seeing it for yourself, you realize that quite simply, Fareed, is not true. There is nothing about Gaza's landscape that says anything other than this is the annihilation of a population and every single aspect of what is needed to actually keep a people alive.
Totally correct. It's the annihilation of a civilian population. 100% correct. 100% correct.
Yeah, it's absolutely it's shocking to see someone like this who gets any airtime on a mainstream show at all.
Okay, well, someone who's also getting some airtime is Ehud Olmert. He's the former Israeli prime minister. He's come out and he's gotten a lot of attention for saying that after it is now over a year and a half, Israel's committing war crimes. So congratulations, Ehud Olmert, for that epiphany.
A little late, but better late.
A little late, yeah, a little late. But anyway, he has thoughts on what's happening.
Is no objective that can be achieved by an expanding military operation. We are going to lose the Israeli hostages. We are going to lose the lives of Israeli soldiers. Thousands of Palestinians, non-involved Palestinians, are going to be killed as a result of further military operations, which almost no one in Israel thinks is at this time valid and is going to achieve anything of value. Not only this, but ministers in the cabinet of Netanyahu, as I call them, the thugs of the cabinet, are calling for starving Gaza And they say, when asked, how come? They said everyone in Gaza is a terrorist, all of them are Hamas, and all of them should be wiped out and be starved and so on. This is a war crime. There is no other word to describe it but a war crime. And I totally can't accept it. It's unacceptable, unbearable, and unforgivable.
Okay, so far good. He's calling it a war crime, right? That's good. We like that. But let's hear what else he has to say.
You say again, I really recommend that people read this piece. You say in it, I believe the government of Israel is now the enemy from within. It has declared war on the state and its inhabitants. No external foe we fought against over the past 77 years has caused greater damage to Israel than what the current government has inflicted on us. Do you believe that other Israelis, large numbers of Israelis, share these views?
Yes, hundreds of thousands. Fareed, I don't know of any country, democratic country in the Western world, okay, which had a disagreement within, had such a phenomenon of hundreds of thousands of Israelis now rioting and demonstrating on a daily basis in the streets of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and across country, day in, day out, against the violence of the government outside and against the steps taken by the government within the state of Israel.
I wish it were true. I wish it were true, Ehud Olmert, but it's not. People are protesting primarily against Netanyahu's power grab. So, right. Trying to basically keep himself in power by weakening the judiciary. That was the initial source of the protest before October 7th. And then also his abandoning of the captives, of the hostages. They're against that. But is there a mass movement in Israel against mass murder, which has been going on for a year and a half? No. The number of Israelis who oppose that forcefully, vocally, is a very, very small percentage.
Yes. And 82% of Israeli Jews support the forced expulsion of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip.
Exactly. That's the mass movement in Israel. That's the popular will. It's people who support ethnic cleansing, not oppose it.
Right. When he says they oppose the violence outside and the changes within, the change within, sure, but not the violence outside. In fact, the majority think that they're using either the right amount or too little force. That's what Israel thinks, the vast majority.
And under Ehud Olmert, there wasn't a full-blown starvation siege and genocide in Gaza as there is right now, but there were routine massacres by his governments in Gaza, and there was a blockade where Israel was tightly restricting the amount of goods and food that could come into Gaza, putting Gaza on a diet, as one Israeli official once remarked. And that was his policy, Ehud Olmert's policy too, putting Gaza on a diet. He's also the Israeli leader who has supposedly made the most far-reaching peace offer to Palestinians. And you know how he transmitted it? He wrote it down on a napkin. He drew it on a napkin for Mahmoud Abbas, which Abbas was not allowed to take with him. So literally an offer transmitted on a napkin, which Abbas couldn't even take with him. He had to try to commit to memory. And still, Ehud's so-called generous peace offer to Palestinians would have kept still all the major Israeli settlement blocks that make in the West Bank that make a Palestinian state impossible, without even offering Palestinians an equal land swap. So that is the most far-reaching, self-critical Israeli leader right there, Ehud Olmert. And even him, the guy was willing to go furthest in criticizing Israel and offering Palestinians peace, quote unquote, still would have kept all the major West Bank settlement blocks that make Palestinian life in the West Bank and a Palestinian state in the West Bank absolutely impossible.
Right. And here's the thing though, because all the points that you made are very important. Obviously, the points that we just made about how he's misrepresenting popular will in Israel to make it look like they're rising up against this, and when they're not at all. The relevant point here is that you have someone who was a prime minister who did several terrible things to the Palestinians, and he is even calling this a war crime. So the usefulness of this is to tell people who are still defending Israel, by the way, you're defending things that your former prime minister is calling a war crime. That's its rhetorical use, in my opinion. All right, let's go back.
The only thing I have to say to someone still defending Israel is to seek professional help. Honestly,
sure.
I can't even. I'm not even going to. I can't even enter the arena of debate with them at this. But anyway, but I take your point. Listen, it's true. The fact that he feels compelled to speak out does speak to how unbelievably barbaric Israel, that even someone who's overseen barbaric policies feels the need to call out the current barbarity of
you know what we could do, Aaron? We could do like a combo. Like you and I could have an intervention with someone. We both walk with them into the psychiatrist's office, and as we're walking with them, I'm playing this clip of Hood on my cell phone.
Good cop, bad cop. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let's turn now to Cindy McCain.
Oh yeah.
The widow of the late John McCain, and she's also with the World Food Program. She's the head of the World Food Program, right? And she's calling out Israel's barbarism. She's also someone who's been a lifelong neocon. John McCain, obviously synonymous with every single disastrous U.S. military war.
Wanted to bomb Iran.
Exactly. Fulsome support for Israel. She's calling out the starvation siege of Gaza.
Is there anything you can add about this incident this morning? Hamas claiming 31 people killed. You just saw the GHF denying that anything happened. Do you have any independent information?
Well, our people are reporting the same thing on the ground. It's a tragedy, and what we need right now is an immediate ceasefire, complete unfettered access, along with the safe fence roads, every gate open to feed people and stop this catastrophe from happening. If we don't do that, it's going to be a humanitarian catastrophe, as I said, like none other.
So just to be...
It currently is a humanitarian catastrophe like none other. But anyway, she's saying it could get even worse, which is hard to fathom, but it's true because there's right now a full-blown starvation siege with a trickle of aid trucks coming in and this fake humanitarian aid group set up by Israel to try to deflect from all the criticism that Israel is getting, leading to, as we're seeing now, massacres of people desperately trying to receive the little amounts of aid that are being offered.
Yeah, it is quite crazy when Cindy McCain is basically to the left of every single elected official, with a handful of exceptions.
Well, to adopt that lyric from what's his name, like the writer of Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda, where he wrote, Tim Kaine and the Membrane to promote the Hillary Clinton campaign back in 2016. Tim Kaine, the Membrane, Tim Kaine, the brain. Let's get some Cindy McCain, the Membrane of the conscience of Washington. Let's hope that she can reach them.
Yeah, totally.
You're saying your people believe that the incident did in fact happen and that individuals were killed this morning.
Yes, we do.
You're calling for a ceasefire right now. Steve Witkoff said there's been a step back. How important is that right now? And what more can be done to implement that ceasefire?
Well, the previous ceasefire proved that we could do the job. We were getting in over 600 trucks a day during the ceasefire into Gaza. So people they didn't have the feel of desperation. They knew food was coming. They knew they had access to food right now. And now we don't. I mean, they don't have nearly enough access points. They don't have nearly enough food going in. And so the feel of desperation, you can see it in the video, it's very disheartening. I mean, for all of us that do this, this is what we do. We understand what it takes and we understand the complexity of it, but we also understand the grave humanitarian need that is existing now.
Have you had any coordination at all this week with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation?
No, I have not personally. I know.
I like the way she grimaces at their mention because they're such a fraud organization.
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you coordinate with a fake group?
Right, exactly.
Like, the coordination is only going to be like, hey, can you not point out we're a fake group founded by Israeli intelligence and the U.S. government?
Right.
It's kind of
we want to make sure let's coordinate our talking points. Let's pretend we're real.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
No, I have not personally. I know that there's been some meetings that have taken place around the Europe, particularly on some of the things, but we've not seen a plan. We've been a part of some of those meetings. Some of them we have not been. But again, we've seen no plan. And look, we will work with anybody to feed. This is the kind of thing that at this level of desperation, we've got to work together. on trying to feed people. So it's not about not willing to work with people. We need the access. We need the Israelis to let us in so we can do our job. And we do it. We are the best at what we do, I might add. And we're the ones we can not only get in, but we can get in at scale, which is what is most important right now.
Yeah. Remember, the important thing, again, when we're talking about this, is that there was a ceasefire. It shows that it can work. It shows that a president from the United States can impose it. Joe Biden chose not to, and Donald Trump is choosing not to.
All right, let's turn to, okay, well, look, this isn't a Sunday news show clip, but this is a Sunday news show host who we love to make fun of because he's just so horrible. Jake Tapper is currently on a book tour. He's written a new book about the cover-up of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. It's awkward for him because he took part in the cover-up of Joe Biden's cognitive decline.
Which makes him an expert, to be fair.
Yeah, it definitely makes an expert. But, as uncomfortable as that might be for him, Jake Tapper has a safe space. Space for him. He has a comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that is basically being a propagandist for Israel and demonizing anybody who dares to challenge Israeli mass murder and challenge the propaganda that he puts out constantly that justifies Israeli mass murder. So here he is going on another Israel apologist show, Bill Maher's. Bill Maher is our Real Time. And Jake Tapper has thoughts on oppression in the Israel-Palestine context. Really fascinating stuff.
And by the way, Bill Maher is a great place to go because he pretends to be anti-religion in general. He's one of these new atheists who pretends to be anti-religion, and yet somehow it's only Islam he has a problem with. And he's actually okay with a theocratic Jewish state, which is kind of weird for someone who hates religion. But yeah, let's take a look. And also keep your ears up for a buzzword that Jake Tapper's using that he clearly thinks makes him sound smart.
Do with an academic theology of oppressor and oppressed.
Yes.
If you only look at the world as oppressor versus oppressed, you then have to choose in a conflict, this group is the oppressor, this group is the oppressed. It's also why, for example, there have been conflicts on other college campuses where gay students have protested things that are going on in Muslim countries having to do with the LGBTQ community in those countries.
By the way, this is called pinkwashing, which is when you hide behind alleged homophobia to justify, to pinkwash Israel's crimes. You pretend that it's for the sake of LGBTQ people. But you know what's interesting to me? Whenever people say things about the homophobia of Hamas or Islam or the people of Palestine, which first of all obviously exists in among Jewish Israelis, it's weird because it's almost like they don't actually care about the lives of these people because LGBTQ people don't have a magic like force field around them that saves them from bombs. So what I don't understand is why they think this is good for LGBTQ people to be bombing them.
I'd love to see an intrepid interview from Jake Tapper because, there's many child amputees from Gaza or a few child amputees from Gaza who come to the U.S. to receive treatment. Groups like Heal Palestine facilitate that. So Jake Tapper could show up at the airport one day when there's usually it's really a touching scene of people like there with signs greeting these child amputees to welcome them for treatment here in the U.S. So Jake Tapper could go there and ask these children why they don't speak out against the treatment of LGBTQ people in Muslim countries, as if
that's true. Yeah.
Of course, the people of Gaza are responsible for oppression anywhere else, real or imagined. It's there to and Jake Tapper can't possibly understand how people can look at Israel carrying out mass murder against a defenseless, besieged civilian population for more than a year and say, one side here is the oppressor, one side is the oppressed. Like he can't possibly fathom how one can come to that conclusion.
He's going to push back on that oversimplistic dichotomy. But Aaron, what this reminds me of actually is now I used to think it was ridiculous to say that we want to bomb Gaza because we care about LGBTQ rights because you're going to be killing LGBTQ people. But you know what? Joni Ernst makes it all make sense because we're all going to die. Yeah, for heaven's sake.
And the gay students are made to be the oppressor because a lot of them are white. And that's also what's going on when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israelis are made to be the oppressor, the Palestinians the oppressed, and on and on and on. And that's part of what's going on at Harvard, that theology, that way of looking at the world.
Okay,
That's
so by the way,
theology.
yeah, the theology, that's his buzzword, right? He obviously, I'm sure his wife was like, "Oh, that's good. I like that." Or he read in some article. But yeah, see, Aaron, you and I have been confused this whole time because we thought Israel was the oppressor, but really, as Jake pointed out, they're made out to be the oppressor.
I mean, the guiding theology that I see is that Israel deems itself to have all the rights in the world to kill as many people as it wants and steal their land. And Palestinians have no rights. In fact, they're not even human beings. That's the guiding theology. That's the Jewish supremacy that underpins Israel and that Jake Tapper promotes every single day, including right there. And the contortions one has to go through. I mean, imagine the tortured mind this poor fellow has to be able to come up with rationalizations for mass murder, for ethnic cleansing, for genocide, for a starvation siege, which Israel is currently imposing on Gaza. You have to reach deep into your deep into like the darkest or the most cynical areas of your soul to come up with intellectual contortions like that to justify mass murder.
Yeah. And I almost feel, whenever I see that, I almost feel bad for them, but then I remember they're just total ghouls. They're ghouls with blood on their hands who are cheerleading a genocide. But for that, I'm like, God, your brain must hurt because you're just lying through your teeth. It's a combination of like lying through your teeth and using such tortured logic.
Well, there's a reason why Max Blumenthal calls Jake Tapper fake yapper. I think that's a good example of some fake yapping. Okay, let's go back to Medicaid. And we heard earlier from Senator Joni Ernst responding to constituents angry about Medicaid benefits being cut, and she had that now infamous response, "We're all going to die."
So let's see, Aaron, has she learned from her mistakes? You think she's going to like walk it back and apologize?
She must,
right? Because she's an elected official. She believes in accountability.
Yeah.
Let's hear what she had to say in this video that she herself released, where she's walking, by the way, in a cemetery.
Hello, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday at my town hall. See, I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Okay, so by the way, Joni, the issue is not that people don't know we're going to die. The issue is that when someone points out that your policies are going to kill people, your response is to remind people that everyone's going to die anyway. No one's saying, how dare you point out that life is finite? People are saying, maybe you shouldn't be justifying lethal policies by pointing out that people are going to die anyway.
Also, what a terrible way to promote the teachings of Jesus, you know, whose teachings I actually think are wonderful. There's so much to learn from Jesus, but it's like, if you're going to if that's going to be the public face of Jesus' teachings, you're going to repel a lot of people who otherwise could benefit from reading what Jesus had to say, including, you know, who defended the sanctity of life and didn't mock people who care about it, as Joni Ernst is doing. But what I want to know is, like, does she have anybody in her life to talk over, to talk this over with? Like, hey, I'm gonna make a video doubling down on me mocking people who care about patients dying because they lack medical coverage because I've taken away from them. What do you think of that idea? Can someone maybe spitball how that might not be a good idea?
No, I like that. She's having a meeting. They're like, you know what? Not only do I love that idea, but let's heighten it, put you in a cemetery.
Yeah, and let's also
throw you in a graveyard.
And let's also throw Jesus under the bus too, in the process. I mean, like, I'd love to know how that meeting went, if there was such a meeting, and if she has political, you know, senators have big staffs, so there's got to be some people, there's got to be some different voices in the room. Was anybody raising any doubt about this idea?
Well, they're all Christian right sadists, I guess. They really are. They're just, that's it. Talk about theology. Their theology is to totally, I mean, I, as a secular Jew, maintain that I'm a much better Christian than these people.
Me too.
Yeah, you too, Aaron.
Yeah.
I say you are also.
We should start teaching Bible study. I used
We
to study
should.
Bible study.
Yeah, Bible
Okay.
study. Totally, yeah.
Sign up, everybody, for $19.99 a month.
Yeah.
That's the new package we're unveiling. Just $19.99 a month. Youth Studies Bible study.
Gets you right into heaven.
All right. Let's keep going on the issue of Medicaid cuts with House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Congress, and everyone will see they're going to be doing a lot better for that election.
All right, let's move on to Medicaid now. As you know, that's a big part
Oh,
of
wait, hold on. Someone pointed this out. Guys, we have 2,093 people watching. And I'm sorry. I mean, especially after we just offered free Bible classes and had to watch Joni Ernst twice. We got 762 likes. Guys, it's not even half. It's basically a third. So let's get those likes up. Because I'm a compassionate person who embraces Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I will allow us to keep playing the video. But by the end of this Mike Johnson video, we better be up to 1,000 or you're going to hell. Look, you got Aaron really upset. He left. That's how upset he is. All right, let's go back to the videotape.
the debate as well. Here's what the American Hospital Association is warning. It writes, quote, the sheer magnitude of the level of reductions to the Medicaid program alone will impact all parties. Hospitals, especially in rural and underserved areas, will be forced to make difficult decisions about whether they will have to reduce services, reduce staff, and potentially consider closing their doors. Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri calling this a hospital tax, Mr. Speaker. So does the House bill put rural hospitals and, frankly, the most vulnerable Americans at risk?
No, and you can underscore what I'm about to tell you. There are no Medicaid cuts in the big, beautiful bill. We're not cutting Medicaid. What we're doing is strengthening the program. We're reducing fraud, waste, and abuse that is rampant.
And by the way, they are cutting Medicaid. They're just claiming that they have an excuse to do so.
In Medicaid, to ensure that that program is essential for so many people, ensure that it's available for the most vulnerable. It's intended for young, single pregnant women and the disabled and the elderly. But what's happening right now is you have a lot of people, for example, young men, able-bodied workers who are on Medicaid. They're not working when they can. That drains resources from the people that need it most. And so what we're doing here is an important and frankly heroic thing to preserve the program so that it doesn't become insolvent. This is not going to hurt rural hospitals. There's a lot of flexibility built into this. They keep saying that 7.6 million people is the figure that is supposedly going to be affected by this. But when you look at those numbers and you break them down, this is high on public opinion polling. You're talking about 1.4 million illegal aliens that are receiving Medicaid right now. They're not entitled to that. This is for U.S. citizens in those vulnerable populations. There's about 4.8 million people that they're referring to that are able-bodied workers. If you are able to work and you're not, and you are riding on the public wagon, you need to help pull it. And by the way, Kristen, this is no draconian requirement. All we're requiring in the legislation is 20 hours a week. You can volunteer in your community, you can be in a job training program, or you can get to work. And this is my message to young men around the country who are taking advantage of the system. It is abusing the system. We're going to fix that, and I'm telling you that is a very popular thing among the American people because it comports with common sense.
Well, let's talk about that 4.8 million number. That is a CBO number, by the way, which estimates how many people would lose Medicaid if this bill were to go into law. The CBO.
Wait, hold on. They don't, Kristen, they don't.
Wait,
okay.
Let me make my point, and then I'll let you make your point. I think it's important to point out the CBO is not saying specifically those 4.8 million are engaging in fraud. They say many will lose coverage because of paperwork, red tape, or failing and falling short of the new rules. So just let me ask you directly, do you have any actual proof that these people are engaging in fraud? Millions of Americans, as you say.
This is very important distinction. Those 4.8
Okay, so note how he's not answering the question. Okay.
million people will not lose their Medicaid unless they choose to do so. I will go into any town hall in any...
4.8 million people won't lose their Medicaid unless they choose to lose their Medicaid?
Yeah.
Who's gonna choose to lose their Medicaid?
Yeah. This is a typical, they always do this. They make cuts, they pretend that they aren't making cuts, then they pretend that anyone who's on Medicaid is actually some kind of mooch, right? Who is an able-bodied man, as they say, not working when they can, right? But according to a study released by KFF, a majority of adults 19 through 64 on Medicaid are employed. A whopping 64% were working full or part-time.
Hello, is this Medicaid? Yes, I'd like to choose to lose my Medicaid. I'd also like to choose to have like an income that supports me and the basics I need for life. Like,
Yeah.
can I get that too? I mean, like, what is he talking about?
So ridiculous. And of the 36% of people who were unemployed adults receiving Medicaid, 90% aren't working because of school or caretaking responsibility, 10% because of disability, and 8% because they are retired, can't find work, or some other reason.
Yeah, that's the thing. How many people would love to work, but there is no opportunity because people like Mike Johnson serve a plutocrat class that doesn't create enough opportunities and consolidates power and gives themselves tax cuts and doesn't spend enough on infrastructure. I mean, we're just going in a really tough direction with these people. And yeah.
And also already undocumented immigrants, they fearmonger about, they're not eligible for Medicaid anyway. So they're not getting it.
Yeah, all these figures about all these undocumented immigrants getting Medicaid. I mean, I'm sure that's happening in some cases, but on this mass scale, I don't know.
Yeah, which is why he doesn't answer when she asks for evidence. He won't answer. By the way, someone in the comments said, "Who cares about likes on YouTube?" Now, well, for all you know, Aaron and I need a lot of validation. That could be why, but actually, the real reason is it helps people.
That's our love language. Our love language is likes.
Yes, likes.
Isn't that one of the love languages? Likes on social media.
Yeah. In this day and age, But no, it's a good question. Person who kind of hurt my feelings. In fact, I'm gonna need like 5 more likes to just be able to make it through this next sentence. But no, it's because we want to fight the algorithmic suppression. And so we do think it's important that people watch the show in general, but especially this show, this segment, because it debunks so much propaganda. So you are doing the world a service when you like the stream. And as an additional cherry on top, Aaron and I get to cry less into our pillows tonight. We're going to sleep. Yeah. So it's a win-win.
Okay. Is that enough of Mike Johnson? I think
so, right?
All right. Let's go to, he is the White House director of the budget. Management budget. Russell Vought, White House budget director. He's also going to be asked about the Medicaid cuts.
Yeah. And he's also going to be, you see, it's interesting. This is like the two faces of the two diabolical faces. You have Mike Johnson, who has like smiling and the shit-eating grin and pretends to care about people. And then you have Vought, who's kind of on the other end of the spectrum and just wears his sociopathy and sadism on his sleeve and face. Let's take a look.
The reason why we're seeing some pushback is because of the Medicaid cuts that were passed by the House and that are going to go into the Senate. There was a town hall, which I'm sure you saw. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst was asked, it was pretty raucous, about the Medicaid cuts. And she responded by saying, people were saying that people are going to die. And she said, we're all going to die. But the question that
Joni Ernst, the Camus of our time, you know, a stranger, the existential,
Oh, yeah, of course.
Joni Ernst really picking up the existential mantle. I just, I love this for her.
Yeah, it's a good look. Yeah, I'm sure she's a huge Camus fan. I think she's more partial to the plague, but yeah.
He was getting were from constituents were concerns about Medicaid, food stamps, and other government support programs leading to people dying and premature deaths. What do you say to those concerns?
I think they're totally ridiculous. This is AstroTurf. This bill will preserve and protect the programs, the social safety net, but it will make it much more common sense. Look.
Okay, does this, by the way, does this guy look like he likes the social safety net? Like when he's saying that, he doesn't look like he's someone who's like pro social safety net.
The programs, the social safety net, but it will make.
Also, I love the idea of a Republican, accusing someone else of astroturfing when that's like their main playbook is to come up with like fake groups like Citizens for Medicaid Cuts. We're a grassroots organization secretly funded by, the Koch brothers or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, he's involved in a lot of the anti-woke stuff. Remember, this is the guy who talked about wanting to traumatize the federal workers and also combat a woke agenda, a weaponized woke agenda. And actually, Tim Kaine, Insane in the Membrane, Tim Kaine in the Brain, he did a pretty good job grilling him because the guy couldn't explain how like cutting food stamps for kids or cutting SNAP was anti-woke.
Make it much more common sense. Look, 1 out of every $5 or $6 in Medicaid is improper. We have illegal immigrants on the program.
How do you know that? One out of 5. I think what he means is like 1 out of 5 dollars is improper because it helps a vulnerable person.
Exactly, right.
That's triggering for him. That activates his trauma because he doesn't want to see vulnerable people taken care of.
Right.
It's improper.
I know his voice is so bad.
We have able-bodied working adults that don't have a work requirement that they would have in TANF or even SNAP. And those are something that's very important to institute. That's what this bill does. No one will lose coverage as a result of this bill.
That's not what Josh Hawley, who is not exactly a liberal Democrat, said. He said it's wrong to cut health care for the working poor, and that's what we're talking about here with Medicaid.
Well, we continue to work with people in the Senate as to working them through with the specifics of the bill, what it does and what it doesn't do. We'll continue to do that. And I think at the end of the day, the Senate will have a resounding vote in favor of a substantially similar bill.
Note how he didn't push back on that claim.
Exactly.
And talk about we're going to keep working together.
Exactly.
Another reason why we're seeing.
By which he means we're working with people in the Senate. We're taking people like Josh Hawley down a little dark alleyway and saying, hey, what can we offer you to help cut Medicaid? Like, what can we break you off with to get you on board with this? That's what he means by
how do we
addressing
make
Josh
this
Hawley's
worth
concern.
it for you? Yeah. What can we do? Yeah.
Okay. Rand Paul. He's not supporting this so-called big, beautiful bill. He's doing this from a libertarian perspective. And
fiscal deficit hawking. Yep.
Yeah. As we talk about a lot on the show, like libertarians, when they're talking about foreign policy, hey, sign me up. They're against military interventions. Domestically, they're for cutting things like Medicare. So can't be on board with that. But here Rand Paul is going to explain why he's not on board.
Has heard the Treasury Secretary say a number of things, dismiss the potential price increases that could come from the tariffs when it comes to retailers. He also played down the cost of this tax and border bill that just passed through the House. Do you agree with his math?
Well, the math doesn't really add up. One of the things this big and beautiful bill is it's a vehicle for increasing spending for the military and for the border. It's about $320 billion in new spending. To put that in perspective, that's more than all the DOGE cuts that we found so far. So the increase in spending put into this bill exceeds the DOGE cuts. When you look just at the border wall, they have $46.5 billion for the border wall. Well, the current estimate from the CBP is $6.5 million per mile. So if you did 1,000 miles, that's $6.5 billion. But they have $46 billion, so they've inflated the cost of the wall 8-fold. So there's a lot of new spending that has to be counteracted. But essentially, this is a bill by the military-industrial complex advocates who are padding the military budget. There's going to be a lot of extra money. Look, the president has essentially stopped the border flow without new money and without any new legislation. So I think they're asking for too much money. And in the end, the way you add it up to see if it actually is going to save money or add money is how much debt are they going to borrow? $5 trillion over 2 years. Enormous amount.
Well, if you watch Youth Slated regularly, you've heard us call out too much moose.
Yeah.
TMM. Too much moose. And Rand Paul actually could be a candidate for TMM.
Yes, he may be this week's TMM candidate. Yeah.
But he's also calling out too much money. Too much money for the military.
TMM. Yeah, you're right.
He's speaking some truth there.
Yeah. I mean, all this talk about deficits and all this deficit hawking is total BS, but it's useful because, again, it shows the hypocrisy, right? It shows that Donald Trump is full of it when he says he cares about the debt and the debt ceiling. So that's useful. I don't care about the debt either, but that's I say that part out loud. I'm not pretending to be a fiscal conservative. So it is useful to just show how full of it Trump is. And yeah, it is funny that, libertarians were with them with when it comes to cutting the budget for the Pentagon, but that's about it. And some sex work stuff and drug decrim policies. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but Rand Paul is pointing out that DOGE is basically a giant scam and all the supposed cost cutting. They completely ignored the biggest, the most wasteful aspect of the government, which is the Pentagon, which can't pass an audit and which is has a budget that far exceeds all the other countries down the list of military budgets combined. And so this farce proceeds where we're supposed to think that Trump is like a fiscal conservative while increasing the Pentagon budget and cutting vital programs like Medicaid. And even though that's not quite where Rand Paul is coming from, at least he can recognize, as he said, that this big beautiful bill is a big beautiful bill for the military industrial complex.
Yeah. I still can't believe it's called the big beautiful bill. It's so amazing.
All right, Hakeem Jeffries, let's hear from him.
We want to give you some Democrats. We haven't provided you with a single Democrat this show. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, you're in luck. How are Democrats, how are they pushing back? Well, the problem is they have to push back with a public that is not really enthused about them. And so how is Hakeem Jeffries going to handle Democrats' current low poll numbers?
And with policies that they don't actually fight back with. That's another complicating factor. But yeah, let's take a listen.
You brought up polls, so let me tell you about a new one that just came out here at CNN this morning. It shows that only 19% of Americans say that your party can get things done. 36% say the same about Republicans. And just 16% say your party has strong leaders. It's pretty rough, and you are one of those leaders. How do you turn that around?
Yeah, we don't have the presidency right now, so that's always going to be challenging a few months after a presidential election. But we have to continue to make the case, one, that Democrats, of course, are the party that is determined to make life more affordable for everyday Americans, for hardworking American taxpayers, that we believe that we need to lower the high cost of living, which for decades has been going up while the size of the middle class has been going down. So understandably, there's real frustration amongst the American people. They should be frustrated.
But they're
Housing
frustrated
costs are
with
too
you
high.
as well, with Democrats as well.
Of course, they're frustrated with the system. But what is interesting, Dana, I think you're aware of this, every single public poll that has come out since the Trump presidency has had
By the way, we'll back this up a little bit, but I like this. Is he coming out as like opposing the corporate duopoly? They're frustrated with the system.
Rage against the machine. Hakeem Jeffries is raging against the machine.
Exactly.
He's against the system now. I love it.
Yeah.
What is interesting, Dana?
He's just omitting the inconvenient fact that he's a part of the system.
Exactly, right.
And he serves it very dutifully. But anyway, minor detail.
And I think you're aware of this. Every single public poll that has come out since the Trump presidency has had congressional Democrats winning the generic ballot against congressional Republicans. And in fact, we know this is not simply speculative. In every single high-profile special election, Iowa.
It's a really funny dynamic. Basically, both political parties sort of take turns railing against the system that they both equally serve. So Trump's whole thing was, we're going to drain the swamp, right? Drain the swamp. Like, I'm not the swamp, they're the swamp. And same with Hakeem Jeffries. Like, people are mad at the system, but when you both serve the system. So it's like, that's our political system, which is two, like a uniparty trading places, denying responsibility for the same system that they serve.
Too much system. TMS. We don't have TMN, but we have TMS. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Hakeem Jeffries, for that deflection. Let's move ahead to Ukraine. Congressmember Raja Krishnamurthy, total hawk on the issue of Ukraine proxy war, because Democrats decided that was a great thing for them to embrace, having a proxy war against another nuclear armed power. And on Sunday, Ukraine did score a really huge military and intelligence coup with a very audacious drone attack on Russia, where they took out multiple Russian strategic bombers. And they did this by smuggling drones in. And this is over the course of an operation that took a long time to plan. They smuggled drones in basically in wooden pallets. And then they were, engineered so that they were driven in trucks by drivers who probably didn't know what they were doing, close to Russian military bases across Russia, which is a huge country, like 11 time zones, and then launched these drones and took out some major Russian aircraft. This is a very audacious and I think crippling attack on Russia. Now, of course, I think Russia is going to hit back even harder, which has been the pattern throughout this war.
Right.
And this comes right as there's a new round of peace talks going on today in Istanbul. But of course, Democrats are fully on board with this one. And they're not happy with all this talk from the Trump administration of brokering peace. So this is Congressmember Raja Krishnamurthy on Ukraine.
To track U.S. intelligence, I wanted to ask you if you have any insight into what appears to be the swarm of Ukrainian drones that has destroyed 40 Russian military aircraft deep inside Russian territory overnight.
We should say 40 is the number that Ukraine put out. I suspect it's less. Certainly, it may have been 40 damaged or destroyed. I don't know about if they were all destroyed. But anyway, certainly it was a very successful operation.
Sources are telling our Jennifer Jacobs that the White House wasn't aware that this attack was planned. What can you tell us about the level of U.S. intelligence sharing with Ukraine right now and helping them with their targets?
I don't want to get into classified information, but what I can say is that it's a little bit more strained in light of what Donald Trump has said recently. The one thing that I can also say is that Trump was right the other day to say that Putin is crazy in the way that he's going after civilian areas in Ukraine repeatedly. And so the Ukrainians are striking back. At the end of the day, the only way that we can bring these hostilities to an end is by strengthening the hand of the Ukrainians. Trump should, at this point, realize that Putin.
The only way we can make peace is war.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
war. What's so hard to understand about that? What other possible route could there be to peace other than war and more war, which is what we've been doing, not only for more than 3 years since Russia invaded, but for more than a decade after the U.S. backed a coup in Ukraine and set off this whole disaster. And even after Russia's taken 20% of Ukraine's territory and has taken more, Democrats can only say, "Let's have more war." That will bring us to peace.
Right.
And here's the thing. While this was a very successful operation from Ukraine, and I don't want to diminish it, the problem is the war is not only with these aerial assaults, it's also on the ground. And that's where Ukraine is losing. That's where they've lost 20% of their territory. And that's where Russia just has a much stronger army because they have so many more people and they can throw many more people at Ukraine. And Ukraine's running out of people. And that's why you're seeing all these horrific videos of people being kidnapped to go off to die. So yes, don't diminish this operation by Ukraine. It was successful. Huge blow to Russia. Taking out strategic bombers, that's a really big deal.
Right.
But by the way, when you take out strategic bombers, what are those for? Those are for a nuclear war. So what you're actually doing also is worsening the risk of nuclear Armageddon because these are the nuclear forces that deter each other, the U.S. and Russian forces. So even for the war in Ukraine, the significance there is not as much as it is for a possible nuclear war, which you're just making now even more dangerous by taking out those bombers. But anyway.
Right. What do they think is going to be the response from Russia?
That's the thing. That's the thing. Every time we've seen Ukraine launch an audacious attack, Russia comes back and hits Ukraine even more. And that's the Democrats' ultimate strategy, is to use Ukraine to bleed Russia, as has been now admitted so many times.
So disgusting.
Putin is playing him and aid the Ukrainians in their battlefield efforts. That's the best way to get to some type of armistice or truce at the negotiating table sooner rather than later.
Yeah, sooner rather than later. You've been doing this for more than 3 years, like this phase of the war, and even longer if you count the year since 2014. And it didn't work. What you're doing now is increasing the danger by being in a situation where Ukraine, yes, can strike a big blow against Russia, against their strategic bombers, but this is only going to get worse now, thanks to the policies that he is now promoting. And the alternative was embrace diplomacy. And there have been multiple opportunities of that. We've gone over them so many times on this show. And unfortunately, on corporate TV, you can't mention that even Ukrainians said there was a very real compromise reached between Ukraine and Russia 3 years ago in Istanbul, which was then sabotaged by the US and UK. You cannot talk about that yet on corporate TV. And maybe if we survive all this, we don't have a nuclear holocaust. Maybe one day, 50 years, Face the Nation will allow someone to say that.
It's almost like these people don't actually care about civilian life and Ukrainian lives. Almost.
They really don't. They really don't. And for one more example of this, let's go back to Fareed Zakaria on his show. When they have a panel of guests, they're always people who 100% agree. There's never a debate about, hey, is it wise and other alternatives to waging a proxy war against Russia and Ukraine? So let's turn to Financial Times editor Edward Luce, who has a new book about Brzezinski, the former national security advisor, who was really, a lot of this is his work. He dreamed about having a proxy war against first the Soviet Union and then Afghanistan. That was actually his doing. And I'm sure he'd be thrilled to see us doing the same thing now in Ukraine.
It's a nice way to honor him.
Yes, and Corey Shake, who is with the American Enterprise Institute.
States.
In your book, you talk about Brzezinski and Russia a lot. I had forgotten, and you wonderfully reminded me that his dissertation, written in the 1950s, predicted the fall of the Soviet Union because of the fact that it had trapped within it all these nationalities that would be struggling to break free, and that, you know, the communism was not going to keep them together. It feels like...
Yeah, Brzezinski is also the genius who said that, you know, yeah, sure, we funded and armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, but having some riled up Arabs was totally worth bringing about the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Okay, and
That's a nice way of putting it, yeah.
and these riled up Arabs, quote unquote, the same people who ended up doing 9/11. So
Right.
that's the strategic genius that Brzezinski was, who these people love to fawn over now.
Who, of course, is Mika's father from Morning Joe.
Mika from Morning Joe, that's her father.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
A strange way that we are watching that same dilemma of Putin trying to maintain a kind of the last multinational empire.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Brzezinski's Polish sensibility, given Poland's history with Russia, gave him, I think, that extra edge, and he spoke Russian. So that was all very, very helpful. But when Putin said the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century, he didn't mean, he wasn't lamenting the end of Marxist-Leninism or Bolshevism. He was lamenting the end of the Russian Empire, and he was expressly declaring, this is a quarter of a century ago, his intention of rebuilding the Russian Empire.
Okay, this line is always quoted from Putin, that the demise of the Soviet Union, that the demise of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. What they always omit is what he actually said. He said, you know, that the main reason was because it left millions of ethnic Russians outside of Mother Russia, which then created a problem for Russia because they still have these cultural, familial ties to millions of people who are now outside of their control. And so when they have problems like they're being cracked down against, like in Ukraine, where literally after the 2014 Maidan coup, where the U.S. helped empower radical ultra-nationalists, white supremacists, even some neo-Nazis, who tried to effectively ban the Russian language, that created a problem for Russia because Russia feels the need to protect them. That's what Putin was talking about. He wasn't mourning the loss of the Soviet Empire. At least, I mean, maybe in his mind he was, for all I know. I don't know what's in his head. But
that's not what he articulated.
In terms of what he said, he was saying it was a tragedy because now all these millions of ethnic Russians are now outside of Mother Russia. And what do we do about that? And yes, the U.S. has exploited that repeatedly, as they talk about in their own internal documents, that Ukraine's divisions are something we can exploit to help destabilize Russia. So that's the part that gets omitted here on corporate TV.
Right.
And that is what he's now doing. And one of the reasons that the subtitle uses this big biography uses the word profit is because he really did forecast this. And he did forecast that Putin and China would form a sort of alliance of the aggrieved. And I think we saw that last month in May on Red Square, Putin with, Xi Jinping, with North Korea. The alliance of the aggrieved was there with Putin. And they're backing this empire revanchism that Putin's consistent.
So the axis of evil, now we have the axis of the aggrieved.
Right. And revanchist.
Yes. And again, if Putin was revanchist, why did he support the Minsk Accords, which would have kept all of Ukraine intact, but just granted some limited autonomy to ethnic Russians in the East to let them do things like speak the Russian language without state persecution? That's the revanchist Putin that this guy wants us to believe exists. And it's true. Listen, in Russia now, there is a lot of jingoism, chauvinism, and some Soviet revanchism, but I don't think it would be nearly as strong had the U.S. simply let there be peace in Ukraine rather than use it for a proxy war against Russia.
Yeah.
Let's hear more of this clip.
He told us that he's all about.
And, it feels to me like, far from denigrating the Ukrainians, we should be thanking them because they're the one people fighting and dying to stop this from happening.
For 5%.
Let's thank the Ukrainians for being our cannon fodder. for being our
so
cannon fodder. Yes, for
really appreciate it.
For boosting the profits also of our military industrial complex. Thank you, Ukrainians, for that as well. That's Fareed Zakaria. And here is this is Corey Shake of the Shaki of the American Enterprise Institute, a corporate funded think tank, and neocon think tank too.
Of the U.S. defense budget, Ukraine has fought the Russian military largely to a standstill and imposed 780,000 casualties on the Russian army. That is advantageous to the security of Europe.
She's so happy about all this death. It's so great.
It's so great that we've imposed 780,000 casualties. That's just so wonderful. Like, do you ever think, like, maybe not saying that stuff out loud, celebrating the deaths of 780,000 people? That's a lot of people, especially if their country has nuclear weapons.
Right. What a fucking sadist. I mean, but again, another reminder of why Joni Ernst's words are so resonant. We're all going to die.
They've imposed 780,000 casualties. So let's try to get that up to 1 million by spending another $200 billion on the military industrial complex. I'm sorry to make fun of her voice, but I mean, I think sometimes when someone is so sadistic, you can get a little personal.
Yeah, and she's also talking like she's giving like a some kind of public inspiration, public speaking class or something.
It's like her morning like meditation routine. Like
exactly.
Visualize the 780,000 casualties of the Russian side and how inexpensive that was relative for just 2% of our military budgets.
Security of the United States. So I absolutely agree with you. We should not only be thanking the Ukrainians, we should be equipping them to succeed.
All right. Man. Yeah. Okay. Well, yes. I again, putting aside the fact you're celebrating the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, can you explain how killing a lot of people in a nuclear armed country improves the security of the United States? If anything, it makes this world a lot more dangerous because we're messing with a nuclear armed power that, can destroy the world many times over. This is how much these people love hegemony. Russia is a deterrent to U.S. hegemony, especially in its own region. Like the U.S. goal, the whole reason for the expansion of NATO, it was formalized in a 1994 Security Council memo under the Clinton administration. And they said, we're going to expand NATO for the neo-containment of Russia, because expanding NATO gives us a strategic hedge against Russia. They also said, we're not going to say that publicly. We're going to keep that in the background. And so Russia pushes back on that. And because Russia pushes back on that, we have to push back on them by fueling this proxy war that kills hundreds of thousands of people, which gets celebrated on CNN.
It is all so disgusting. The combination of what's happening there and Gaza. It's just repulsive. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in.
This has been a great episode of Monday Morning. Our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. You can go there to support the show. Katie, you want to plug this week's Katie Halper Show?
Yeah, we're going to be doing a great interview with some of the organizers of the first Jewish anti-Zionist Congress. We're going to also be talking to people who are participating in a march to Gaza. So you should definitely look out for that show because we're going to be talking about some really useful information about both of those things. And if you're in the Vienna area, please do come to the first Jewish anti-Zionist Congress. And there will be Jews there, but there will also be Palestinians there. And yeah, that's about it. We'll put a link to that in the description.
All right. Thanks so much for watching Useful Idiots Monday Morning. Our website, again, is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Please go there to support the show, get bonus content. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.